that they think that sitting down and studying a book is teaching them discipline and teaching these things that it's going to take them into the workforce. But going through a sport and being committed to that is something that definitely gives an advantage. I think if you look at student athletes compared to anybody who didn't play a sport or wasn't physically active, I think the athlete always kind of has the advantage when it comes to work ethic.
Yeah, I think that's something that my parents ingrained in me from a very early age, is that discipline is transferable. So if you learn discipline, and a really good way to do that is through sports, then you can transfer it into any endeavor. So that's something definitely to keep in mind for parents out there, but also for kids out there. Because once you learn how to, work really hard towards a goal day in and out, then you're unstoppable. So I think it's inspiring as well. And I think you said that you have experience in the States, and just the sheer number of athletes that are also student athletes, and just that sheer number is kind of inspiring as well.
Yeah.
So before we get into some of the Olympic questions, since this is, about health and fitness and everything, I'm going to ask about a little bit more about training. Now with swimming, we know that, your shoulders can roll forward from all of the forward motion and everything. What have you done to sort of rehab and prehab that? What advice can you give to some of the younger athletes who are, in the sport of volleyball, baseball, swimming, or anything with that forward movement that just kind of, because there are a lot of, from what I know and from what swimmers have told me, rotator cuff tears and all kinds of injuries that come along from that. And people think swimming's an easy sport. There's no joint degradation, but in reality...
Yeah, I think easy, we'll use that word very loosely because I don't think swimming is an easy sport, but it is it's not an impact sport, right? So your joints are not being pounded on concrete or you're not running and stuff. So it is really great for your body, but obviously when you do something repetitively, you're at risk of getting injured. And with swimming, it's very common to have shoulder problems. I personally didn't experience that many shoulder issues, but I did experience some tenderness. And some of the things that we'd obviously warm up before getting in the water. You're stretching, you're kind of getting everything moving. And then we ice a lot. That was kind of a huge thing that we would do. Ice after practice, which was not very fun, especially when it was freezing outside. But I think, it's important to be smart. And to understand your body and what it's capable of doing, because sometimes, let's say your coaches are pushing you, and you have all these pressures and you want to keep going, and the reality is that when you're injured, it's probably the worst. It's the worst time because you want to be pushing yourself, you want to be with your team or contributing and working hard, but you can't, and it's a very frustrating time in an athlete's life. And so it's important to just kind of stay positive. There's a lot of mental stuff that's also really important, like visualization. But you can also, there's never a reason, well, there can be a reason to stop training, but for the most part, there's never a reason to fully stop training. So with swimming, people that have shoulder issues sometimes would work on, their kick, they'd focus on other aspects. Or if you pull the muscle or, then you'd work around it. So the key is to be consistent. And I think that's like a very crucial thing for any athlete is consistency.
So is there any work that you do in the gym? Kind of like obviously we see like a lot of people who are doing swimming, running, cycling, like kind of monostructural activities, who don't really spend that much time in the gym, and then they might find like they get imbalances or kind of different, like kind of they might get injured in a certain side or something like that. Is there anything that you guys do specifically to stop that or to treat that?
So going back to this, my brothers and I and our rivalry about sports and which one is the worst. When I did a body scan and my brother did a body scan, he was completely lopsided, right? Because he played tennis and his right hand was his dominant hand. Yeah. With swimming, I was completely like equal on both sides.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
And that makes sense, right? Like you're swimming and you're doing everything on the same side. In terms of what we do in the gym, I think it differs on team by team, but we would get in there and we'd do a lot of Olympic lifts. But that was in my college career. So I was doing like pull-ups and stuff like that in Kuwait and core workouts and stuff, because the core is like the powerhouse of your body, right?
Yeah,
like
for
it
sure.
prevents a lot of injury, and if you have a strong core, it's kind of the fundamental building block of any move.
Well, the breath is so important, and that's part of your core, and so that's
Yeah.
why the core training is
It's
in your spine.
No, yeah. So we did a lot. And swimmers call on land exercises or gym exercises dry land as well. There was a component of dry land exercises like with medicine balls or abs and stuff. So it's really, people don't realize that swimming, there's more than just the actual training that you do inside the pool.
Yeah.
You actually spend time in the gym lifting, doing Olympic lifts.
How often a week would you like at your peak, would you have done it?
Probably lifting 3 times a week. And that would be before a swim. So then you would apply kind of the movements and build on and then jump in the water right after.
Okay.
And then
That was in college, or that
was in college. And then
interesting.
we did dry land as well, probably 2 times a week. And this is all on top of training. And then we also did a bit of visualization leading up to like swim meets and stuff. So it's a very...
And then getting the swimming in as well.
And then getting the swimming in and getting the competing in.
How many hours in the pool did you guys do? Like, especially in college, I guess. Like, how many hours were your practices? Were you doing like 2 days, and how long was each practice?
So yeah, we were doing 2 a days, probably alternating between 2 a days and 1 a days. But probably each practice would be around 2.5. It depends on the day. And in Kuwait, I'd probably say like an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half at night for the swimming component, and then I'd have to do stuff on my own as well. So
Yeah, that was one of the things, like growing up, it was big on, building up the yards, and it was, 2 hour practices or so, probably during, high school and stuff. And then you taper off for whatever meets. And then in college, we started off my first year, it was 2 a days like that, almost 2 hours each practice, plus the dry land, jumping stairs and lifting weights and all that kind of stuff. But what we started then after that was like, we would have days where we'd do less time in the pool. We'd go do like rock climbing. We would do Pilates. We would do, more time in the weight room and the Olympic lifts. And then like CrossFit became like a part of it. And the hours in the pool actually started to decrease, and everyone's times and things actually got better with that. Wow. That was something that was cool. I just got exposed to a lot more. Because it was kind of the same idea with like running, like with marathoners, right? Like they build up their miles, and then you kind of, taper off before things. Swimming kind of had the same thing. And it was really interesting because I grew up with that method too, of just building up the yards, packing on the extra suits and all the extra drag, and and then you taper off before the big meet. So it was really interesting to see like how we played other sports, how that started to impact the times and things.
That's really cool. And I'm going to definitely send an email to my college coach advising that the current women's swim team gets less time in the pool and more time doing Pilates. I don't know how that's going to go down with him, but I think
it's interesting to hear the different methods though against
definitely
the college
is.
team.
And I learned a lot swimming in the States, just because everyone had the kind of different backgrounds as well. My yardage was definitely on the lower end of the spectrum compared to my teammates, but I learned a lot from them in a lot of different ways, and I'm obviously very thankful for them.
That's cool. Do you continue with Olympic lifts and those kinds of styles of training outside of the pool now, or do you still swim daily, or what's kind of the routine right now?
Right now, I actually do a lot of Pilates, which is very interesting that you mentioned that.
Awesome.
But I'm not competing at the moment, but I'm hoping that, I can encourage other girls in Kuwait to start competing and kind of pass the baton to them. But I'm still very active. I believe in like leading a healthy and active lifestyle. And I think athletes, once they, let's say, stop competing at that level and training at that level, they get into like a post-athletic depression, or there's even like a post-Olympic Games depression, which people don't really talk about as well. And I think that it's really important to be active and to, get your endorphins in every way that you can, just so that you can live a great life. So
what is the post-Olympic depression? If you don't mind me asking, I've never heard of that before. Like, that is something that I'm a first at hearing that.
I don't think I personally experienced it, but I can understand, or start to understand a bit of it. But I think it's basically the idea that, you're at the pinnacle of your career and at a level so high, and once you're done with that, you're in that spotlight, and once that moment is over, you're kind of thrown into the background. And it's really frustrating because people don't understand the amount of training, sacrifice, and hard work that goes into getting to the Olympics and getting to that stage. So all they see is that little snippet. And so for some events, like for swimming, let's say, or for other events, running, it's like mere seconds. And people don't understand that it's taken years to get to that
entire
point.
lifetime.
Entire lifetime,
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of the idea that people are only relevant, once every 4 years, and they don't understand.
Which is sad, because there's so much that goes into that, and
Yeah.
there's so much behind the scenes, and it's like, it's truly amazing that someone could live their whole life, go day in and day out to get to the Olympics. You get there, and then if you just came so close, and it's like, okay, now what? But some people pick themselves up really well after it and lead amazing careers afterwards. And some people, you hear about these stories a lot of, this person that, especially pro sports players, a lot of them, you hear about them just going downhill afterwards. So
Yeah.
And I think that, yeah.
So I was just going to say, like, I think it's more relevant for people who come first rather than people who come second and third and below, because like they won, and then it's like that kind of lull after competition where they're kind of like, okay,
Now
what do
What am
do
I training
now?
for now?
yeah, you get off the high.
So whereas like
Yeah.
the second and third
Yeah.
guys were like, okay, like I know what I've got to do to get better, like I only need to get like a second better or however much, and they're driven. Whereas the guys who came first, they kind of got to choose then whether they want to continue to compete, or like kind of what they're going to do, whether they want to finish, whether they like. So it's kind of like, I think there's a lot of mental character, and that kind of the support network that they have before they go to the Olympics maybe doesn't exist as much after the Olympics, and so it's really, really important for people like the family and everyone and the support network they have around them to be there just as much for them after. And it could be at any level, like it could be at Olympic level, but or it could be like even just like kind of, it could be
National level,
Yeah, it could
yeah.
be national level. It could be like for some of the CrossFit guys, like competing at Battle of the East, if that is their like kind of their Everest.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of like, okay, what do I do now? So I think it happens to a lot of athletes as well. Like when they have kind of such a good season, and then they're kind of like, well, what do I do?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not at that level, you could work to the next season. But if you're at that level and you're a 32-year-old and it's your last shot, or a 34-year-old and it's your last shot at doing something, after that it's like, okay, do I go coach? Do I go do this? And then some people just kind of go off, and you never hear from them again.
There's always a step out of the spotlight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're not going to be
Totally.
like that athlete who.
Well, you see some of them that step back into the spotlight, and I think those are like great examples. I'm going to go to baseball because that's like the one sport that I know. Like David Ortiz, he retired a couple of years ago, but he's still in the spotlight. He still goes out, helps out, coaches guys, coaches young athletes. He's a spokesman for.
What about was it Michael Jordan? He came to baseball after basketball.
No,
right?
Michael Jordan.
Because he retired. He retired, and then he was like, "I'm going to do something else." And so, but then he went back.
He picked the wrong sport. Hitting a round ball with a round bat is one of the hardest things to do in sports.
This is my attempt at bridging the gap between something that I find interesting and baseball.
All right.
But that is like after that lull that you're talking about, that was after college swimming was done. That's kind of why I got into the competing of CrossFit. It was introduced during college swimming as part of our training, but that was something was like, when you're done competing, you're just like, well, what now? And I didn't get really good at swimming until like my senior year. Like I didn't make it to nationals or anything like my first 3 years. And then like the last year I peaked at everything. And I'm like, well, shit, now it's over. Like, what do I do? And CrossFit helped fill that void. But then once I stopped with that too, it is hard to know, like, what am I training for? Like exercising kind of takes on a different tone, like you're just kind of like, what? And it takes a